Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Midweek Metagame. I'm your host, Gabriel Nassif, joined by my regular co-host, Edgar Magalhaes, EdgarMTG. How did I do on your
How's it?
last name?
You're doing better every week. How you doing, Gab? How was your week?
Good, good. No, I usually just say EdgarMTG because I don't want to gamble, but I was feeling a little daring today. I had a pretty good week. Nothing too special, but this weekend was exciting. The RC, of course, we're going to talk about that. USRC in Houston. There was KubeCon going on too. I did some coverage for that as well. That was a fun event to cover. And then I played all modern on my stream. I had some cool experiments. Can talk about that at the end, but yeah, we're gonna get kind of in the weeds. Full breakdown of the USRC modern. Before we get into all of that, I'd like to remind you if you want to support us, you can do so at patreon.com/midweekmetagame for as little as $1 a nap. And Edgar's kind enough to let me shout out my sponsors, Ultimate Guard, TCG Player, Channel Fireball. They sponsor my stream, my content, the podcast, all that good stuff. Help me make a living of making magic content. So yeah, if you want to check them out, follow them on social media to know when they have promotions, sales, new products. TCG Players, great place to buy your cards if you live in the US, and Ultimate Guard has amazing sleeves, deck boxes, everything you need to protect your cards. So check them out, especially if you live in Europe. You can purchase sleeve and whatnot on their website directly, and you can even get a discount. Maybe the link should be on YouTube in the description. You get I think 10% year-round discount pretty much using my code at checkout. But yeah, another week, another RC in the books, a big one, that one. The first of the two US RCs. Do you know how many players competed in Houston this weekend, Edgar?
It looks like just over 1,000 people. 1,045 is what the final standings are showing. So a pretty big RC compared to what we've even seen from the US in the past.
Yeah, especially since it's split in half. The second one will be in Vegas in a few weeks. I know their European one is November 23rd. I don't think I'll be going. When's yours already?
I think it's that same weekend, November 23rd.
Okay.
So a few weeks away still.
But yeah, it was interesting. I think the storyline, kind of two storylines, I want to say. Titan kind of staying on top, most played deck, and still really solid win rate. A little worse than what we saw at the Pro Tour, but still really good. And Jeskai Blink, the breakout deck of the tournament, and kind of an interesting one because it is a deck that we tested for the PT that one of our teammates, Matt Costa, played. I think his record at the PT was what, 5-5, 6-4?
Yeah, something like that. I think 6-4. Yeah, he was the only one to play it. He did swear by the deck pretty hard going into the event, so maybe we owe him a little bit more respect than we gave the deck credit for. I know a bunch of us were talking about it like in the days leading up, but we just felt like we didn't have enough time to, work on it a little bit more. But after the PT, I guess some other teams picked it up, and it's kind of been surging back up.
Yeah, for those of you watching on YouTube, I loaded up the matrix, win rate matrix of this weekend. This is the RC plus LCQ some other tournaments. But yeah, Jeskai Bling did the best, 58% win rate out of, decks was a reasonable sample size. Put two players in the top 8, including the winner and Jesse Hampton, Slacks. So that was kind of impressive. Yeah, our reasoning for not loving the Jeskai deck is that you were adding a color, and some of us felt like it wasn't worth it. I only played one league. I thought it was quite good, but I kind of decided to trust the team on that one. You have to kind of make decisions, sacrifices, and I guess maybe we underestimated the deck a bit, or maybe the meta was kind of good for Jeskai, but we see it has basically no bad matchups besides Titan, which is 40%, but everything else is over 50. Titan has basically no bad matchups at all across the board. Few like slightly sub 50% matchups, but great showing. Might have to start playing Titan soon.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna get to that later, but it's kind of a glaring result, to be honest. The fact that it was the most played deck, it's kind of like a non-intuitive deck as well, and I'm sure that there were plenty of new pilots on the deck. It doesn't really not really the type of deck that rewards magic fundamentals like picking up some other decks might be. So the fact that it still had such a incredibly positive win rate after this weekend is certainly worth noting.
Yeah, we were talking about on my stream today. People were pointing out that the lines are a little less complicated, maybe now in some ways that you do the same thing more often than not. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, so I mean, if we're comparing it to Titan of, 10 years ago at this point, there's a lot more deterministic lethals, right? A lot of more actual combo lines, compared to when you used to just, Squadron Hawk your Titan, like get a TOS, set up another thing with some long-term planning in that sense. Um, but this deck is more mechanically complicated, and I think requires people to have a little bit more, upfront prep than some other previous iterations. I was actually talking to Brittany about this yesterday, and I was explaining to her that I kind of think of it a lot very similarly to the mono green devotion deck of Pioneer from a couple years ago, where when that deck popped up and people had figured out the combo lines with that deck and like how to do that, it took a lot of time for people to kind of work through practicing that outside of tournament so that it was more natural for them inside of tournament, and really getting those loops established and how to communicate it to your opponent, stuff like that. So I think as time passes, we're going to see, a lot more consistency with that kind of stuff from the players.
Yeah, it's a tough deck to pick up, but I was making the point that if you're going to pick it up for an RC, you should not just jam leagues, you should be very precise and very, um, how do you say,
Studious, right?
studious, but also just practice with a purpose, learn the
Hmm.
lines. Because leagues can be a little slow. Some people will make you do the combo. So it almost feels like you should maybe just be goal fishing, or if you have the luxury of having a teammate you can play against that's not going to make you make the loops, practice, in real life. Maybe practice your shortcuts when you're going to shuffle a couple times in a row. I saw you had a little rant on social media too. Something about
I did. Yeah. I was a little frustrated watching coverage because I witnessed a moment where I mean, obviously I can't hear what's happening at the table, but from my perspective, I could see that, or I think I saw that the Amulet player was trying to, say that they had a loop, but um, perhaps couldn't really, properly demonstrate it. So that, within the rules, if you properly demonstrate a loop, your opponent can't make you do it, right? They have to, accept the loop or say that they're going to interrupt it somehow. But you need to be really confident in your ability to, show a true deterministic loop and explain it properly to your opponent in order to do that. And the turn kind of ended up dragging on for like 10 or 15 extra minutes, and the player ended up winning anyways. But it's a bit of a frustrating experience for all parties, I think.
yeah, for sure. I played talked about it a bit already, I think in one of the previous episodes, but I played against Titan in my first run of constructed at the PT, and I was a little frustrated with the fact that my opponent was taking up so much of the clock. Not really their fault. They were like doing an okayish job, but could have been a bit better on the shortcuts and a little crispier in the execution. But it's not easy. But yeah, Titan was doing well on coverage all weekend. We saw a decent bit of. I didn't watch a ton of rounds, but I saw a decent bit of Esfrigoros just because the player at the top of the leaderboard who was undefeated for a while was playing Esfrigorios and doing quite well. So we're gonna get into the top eight, who made top eight. Gonna get in kind of nitty gritty of the list, take a look at all that good stuff, and we're gonna start with Vinnie Feno, who won the event, was Jeskai Blank. So congrats to him, RC champion and qualified for Worlds. And yeah, this was his list. I guess I need to be careful, not everyone's watching on YouTube. But yeah, he played Jeskai Blink, which kind of caught me a little off guard. I like the deck. I think the deck's super solid and clearly good. But what caught me off guard is how much it was played, how well it did. Because I went and checked because I didn't thought we saw it a lot online the week coming up, and I went and looked at like top eights of every modern challenge for the week leading up to the RC, and there was one Jeskai Blank that made top eight in one of the challenges. So I don't know if you know how like a bunch. It wasn't like one of the most played decks, but it was decently represented, and high profile player Jesse Hampton. Potentially discussing it with his teammates. I don't know if other member of Handshakes were playing the RC or other people he tested with played the deck, but do you know, were you surprised as well, or did you know that was kind of maybe coming?
I had a feeling that it could happen. I didn't really expect it in this number. I mean, so from the metagame breakdown, the Blink variants were the most played deck when you combine them, but obviously, they all play out pretty differently. And when you separated them out, I think Jeskai was only uh, it was only about 3% of the metagame, so it wasn't a massive share. What I'm guessing is that, maybe there was some communication from some of the smaller teams about it. I know the winner of the event plays with Team Scrap Heap, I believe, so maybe they had quite a few players on it. Not sure how Jesse arrived. Maybe he also worked with someone on that team because his list is very similar to the winner's list. Um, the differences in the main deck are quite small. I think Jesse had a couple spell snares where Vinnie had like an extra Teferi and some other threat, but all arrived at a fairly similar list. So I think that there was some sort of contingent that kind of either put a list out there, put the idea out there, and people started working on it either separately or together.
Yeah, the big changes compared to Matt's list. I believe Matt had the full 4 ephemerate at the PT, and Vinny was only playing 2. I think Jesse had 3, and they were playing more Teferi, more Fables. 2-2 split for Jesse, 3-2 split for Vinny. I'm a big Fable believer. I haven't played this deck since the PT, since my one league I played before the PT, but I was trying to get Costa to play more Fables, less Teferi, just more Fables in general when your deck has 4 Flage in it. And the big downside of Fable is that it's no white, can't be pitched to Solitude. We see Vinny's list has 2 subtleties and a Force of Negation in the sideboard, so that's another nod to Teferi. I know that's not how Magic works, but I think if Fable was white, it would be a no-brainer for of. I think it maybe might still be, but I guess if 2 players made top 8 and they didn't play more Fable, everyone knows how good Fable is, so maybe I'm wrong about that one, but yeah, pretty interesting
Yeah,
list.
it's really tough too because the deck is somewhat glutted on 3 drops as well, and I know that Fable kind of has that benefit of being able to smooth out your other 3 drops, but you don't always have that luxury either. And you already want 4 Flage, and both of these players decided they wanted some number of Teferis, so it's kind of hard to fit a whole glut of those in the deck.
Yeah, a couple interesting cards. One Wrap Disguise in the main deck, not something you see a lot, and 2 more in the sideboard, as well as March of Otherworldly Light in the main, which is a card personally I'm not a big fan of. I think it's not very efficient unless you expect a ton of Saga decks. but maybe that was maybe that's a little hedge against Titan. Had Brute Scale have a good showing recently. Do well in a bunch of tournaments. Do well online, and then the threat of Affinity, I guess.
Yeah, one other thing that I like about both Vinny's list and Slax's list, um, that kind of alleviates a concern that I had with the list we have for the PT is the fact that they're both playing 4 Charmaws in the sideboard instead of White Orchid Phantom. And one of the major issues we had with the deck was the mana base, and the double white was quite difficult when you want to have such a red heavy mana base for Ragavan. So being able to play the Charmaws instead, they're really nice with your Arena of Glories as well. Being able to haste that out and get in huge chunks of damage. Now we felt like we didn't have that luxury going into the PT because of Belcher being a concern, and obviously Charmaw is quite poor there, where Phantom is great. But with how Belcher has been performing recently and continues to perform, did quite poorly this weekend. I think that change makes a lot of sense to have something better against Amulet, better against Eldrazi, and just better overall for the mana base.
Yeah, especially since Amulet plays I still now pretty much I think every Amulet list. I say that I didn't check Colin Smollen's list, but he actually did not have ice still in the main board or the sideboard. Of course, I say that, and he decided to go a different route. But White Orchid Phantom less impactful there. You talked about Belcher, and I like Charma because Charma is just straight up 10 out of 10 against Eldrazi decks, Tron decks, and
Right.
I just in modern, especially in a deck like Jeskai Blink, where you probably have, your main deck cards are pretty versatile. Whether it's cards like Teferi, Fable, Flage, your removal, Consign's always good in your deck. So you probably don't need a ton of cards for different matchups. You can probably get away with narrower, like higher impact cards, and just love Charmo if you have the room for it. So yeah, that was Jeskai Bling doing really well, winning the event. Um, I'm assuming Jesse was already qualified for the PT, but playing for the money, the world's invite, the love of the game. Um, we had Boros Energy have a little like comeback, 51% win rate overall, as opposed I think to like 47 at the PT. So I guess that's people shifting their lists a bit, their deck choices, the meta maybe um, a little better for Boros Energy. Maybe more of these blue-white decks it does well against. Um, and we see 65% against Azorius control, even though it's not a ton of matches. But yeah, just pretty solid deck across the board. That was our second place finisher, John Puglisi Clark, and his list was fairly stock. Um, just 2 Voice of Victory main deck, the 2 Charms, the 2 Blood Moons, kind of nothing that stands out too much to me. Maybe the third Arena of Glory is not always stock, but I like that.
I think it's pretty stuck. I mean, I don't know how common the main deck Blood Moons are right now, but that makes a lot of sense for this deck. With the rise of Amulet, the fact that Goryo's was one of the better performing decks, and I think that's one of your best plans against Goryo's. And then obviously Eldrazi continues to be ever present. So I think a lot of people were already doing that at the PT, but John perhaps had it in higher quantity. And I think he ended up beating Amulet in the semis, or I'm not positive about that actually, but I'm sure he played against Amulet a ton during the weekend.
He beat Gorys in the quarters, 2-1, and he beat Prowess in the semis.
Okay.
Actually, he played once against Titan in round 4 and won 2-0. Yeah, I think 2 Blood Moon's pretty suck when I play against it online. I want to say the list that did the best at the PT were also playing Blood Moon main. I know when I played my feature match somewhat late into day 2, I think my opponent had two Blood Moons in the main deck. So yeah, pretty common choice. I guess the other story is like two Prowess decks in the top eight as well. That was a deck we liked going into the PT. Two of our teammates played it. They didn't do especially well, so I guess it's just a little variance there. It had a 50% win rate overall. If we take a look at the lists, were they doing anything special for slick shots, for iterations, for preordained, just like super stock main deck
Super
for
stock, yeah.
Sam Clayton, for Unholy Heat in the sideboard, Regent for Consign. So nothing.
I think both of the lists opted for Murktide region in the board rather than Abhorrent Oculus. I'm not sure how contentious that is. I know that our team had Oculus, and I've seen both throughout the weeks. I don't know if the kind of the norm has swapped over to region recently, but both of these lists had region instead.
Yeah, the only old spice is one surgical extraction main deck for Gauge Hergert over the force mutagenic growth. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, the deck overall kind of just performed medium though, despite the two top eights. I mean, it's kind of just losing or even down the board against basically everything, um, and performed really badly against Amulet, which is kind of a known tough matchup for the deck, I think.
yeah, yeah, just variance, probably tight plays from these two players. I can't remember what what we thought about is it Prowess as far as skill and how how you approach the matchups. Different matchups can make a difference, and just the way you approach the games and pace your threats and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think when we were talking about it ahead of the PT, I remember Luna speaking about it a lot, specifically for the mid-range matchups, or maybe it was just Boros specifically that she was speaking about, where she felt like Izzet was able to take kind of the control route in those matchups, where a lot of people tried to play it as if that they were the beatdown. Um, so in terms of role assessment, I think that might be the only thing that is unintuitive to some people. Um, but I mean, depending on how your sideboard is structured, there's only so much jockeying you can do, right? Or so much role positioning. If you don't have the right tools, you won't be able to do that. But like you said, the list that did well had a whole clip of unholy heats plus the Murktide region, so maybe they were aware of that.
Yeah. Next, we had Collins Mullen, who did well at the PT, right? I think he beat Reed in the last round to go
He did, yeah.
11-5. And yeah, just back to back, really, really good finish for one of our, you know, dedicated Titan player, right? He's been playing the deck forever.
No, not forever. I talked to him at the last PT because I hadn't. So he's a former teammate of mine, obviously, when I played on the SCG circuit, and he kind of picked up the deck over COVID, I think he said, or maybe right before that, and kind of has like fell in love with the deck over time and has been playing it religiously ever since.
All right, well, he didn't pick it up for
But
the PT, I guess. Then I wasn't okay. Maybe it wasn't forever, but
yeah, yeah. But yeah, I mean, he's obviously did well back to back. I don't know if this is the same list he played at the PT, but it is has some noticeable or notable differences compared to, whatever the stock list is, whatever you want to call it. The big one being the inclusion of Cultivator Colossus, which is, a card that has ebbed and flowed out in and out of the deck throughout the years, but as of recent, I think most people have not been playing it. I actually know that Canister started playing it again recently as well. I'm not sure if that's related to seeing the results or maybe similar conclusions, but I know that Collins ended up winning a pretty impressive game on camera, almost solely due to the fact that he had access to the Cultivator Colossus, where he might not have been able to win otherwise. Um,
yeah, against the Esper
so I
Goryo
mean,
player,
just
right?
another toolbox deck that can reward you for very small changes week to week, right?
Yeah. As far as the land goes, I feel like I don't see anything Two out of the ordinary, but yeah, the big one is Colossus, and no ice seal in the main deck, no ice
Yeah,
seal
and the
in the
main deck bauble
sideboard.
too as well is not always there, but that one a little bit more common.
Yeah, and then his sideboard stock up is a card you see in the decent bait. Six is a card I felt like he had six in play whenever I was watching the coverage. Dismember collector,
Yeah,
oof.
6 does double duty. It's kind of like a mid-ranky value card, maybe similar to the Ice Till, but it also enables some combos, and I'm not I'm not a super expert on those ones. I know that they're a little bit more convoluted, but they do there is a way that 6 can enable some combos as well. And then I'm not sure if the Force of Vigors were always there. I think that they were not that common at the PT, but it makes sense for them to come back with affinity numbers increasing and the mirror as well.
Yeah. So yeah, you talked about Colossus. That card helps you in these spots where your opponent has a lot of interactions. I think you were talking about that. We both saw that game, the one against Esper Goryo, right, where he
Right.
won a really long game after getting Colossus like pretty early on, and then I think the game dragged out, and he was able to make a lot of saga constructs. I think.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right. So yeah, his opponent had a lot of interaction for Saga and Amulets early on, and then was also threatening, to exile. Like Titan is not very powerful in this iteration of the deck without any amulets in play. So like a solid, like just getting a Titan and like would have lost the game to a Solitude almost certainly, but being able to get the Colossus instead kind of let him grind through all of that, and then I think he had to get a little bit lucky with the top of his library to chain into some lands, but he gave himself that opportunity to do so.
so yeah, maybe you already mentioned it, but you'd say it's like a nod to solitude heavy meta to have that card in your deck.
Solitude and Wrath, I believe, is the logic. Yeah. Wrath of the Skies, or just enchantment removal in general. Just having a yeah. When you don't have Amulet in play, I think
Yeah.
as often.
All right. Next up, we had Noe Lil Jr., who was at the top of the standings for a while. That was Agor's opponent in that crazy Colossus um, game, and yeah, time to get in nitty gritty. I know as for Goryo is your favorite deck in Modern right now. It was last week. It was your front runner for Modern for the RC, even though the RC is not up for a while. And yeah, talk to me about Noe's list, what you like about it, what your current differences are. I believe your lists are really similar right now. Your main deck, anyways, right?
Yeah. So main deck almost exactly the same as what I was playing prior. I mean, he has this March of Orly Light that you hate. It seems like everyone just packed exactly one copy of that card to register this weekend. Which is pretty funny. But yeah, I mean, overall, my impression on Goryo's, I mean, I still like the deck a lot, and Modern is fairly balanced overall, but a little bit more hesitant than I was in prior weeks, just because of how strongly Amulet is performing, and I mean, this is Goryo's is the only deck amongst the most played decks that is actually ahead of Amulet by the numbers. Um, Obviously, within a couple percentage confidence interval, it could be something else or it could be under. But yeah, I mean, his list is fairly stock. Not a lot of innovation this week compared to what we saw in prior weeks or at the Pro Tour. Overall, Goryo's didn't do too well, and I wonder how much of that has to do with perhaps a lack of innovation. I know it's a deck that feels a lot tighter than some of the other strategies in terms of, what slots you can change, but we still see a lot of the same, multiple main deck thought seizes, some prismatic ending type cards, one or two supplementary counter spells in the main deck, and then the same hate in the sideboard we've been seeing week to week. So um, I think that there's some things that you could do with this archetype, with the rise of Amulet and kind of the fall of some other decks. Like perhaps we need to be moving away from these extra disputes that were kind of there mostly for Belcher and for the control decks that are less prevalent now. The graveyard hate may be less necessary, and maybe we need some more dedicated hate for some of the more popular matchups now. I was thinking a lot about Ashiok or Harbinger of the Seas, I think, are options that this deck could play going forward that would help a lot.
Yeah, I like Ashok a decent bit. Harbinger sounds a little sketchy in your free
It's a
color
bit,
deck,
yeah.
but
Yeah,
yeah,
it's awkward because it's a card that is frequently good against you as well, but like obviously in the matchups you would board it in, it would be
yeah.
you would be able to control it, you'd be able to affect around it at your own pace, and it would be more detrimental for them. But yeah, maybe Ashiok's a better option.
Yeah, my experience trying the blue Harbinger and something like blue white control was all hit or miss, especially when they know you have it. But yeah,
One thing
pretty.
that surprised me a lot from the results this weekend, with regards to Goryo specifically, is how poorly it did against Affinity. It had a 34% win rate against Affinity over the weekend, over I think like 80 matches, which is a fairly large sample. And I wonder if that's the type of matchup where, we've talked about this before, where for the most part you can trust the data unless you have some sort of, novel approach to a matchup or something that you think would like change something dramatically rather than just saying that people are playing it poorly. And I think that that could be one of the matchups where, I look at those results, 34%. Maybe there's just a big group of people who are approaching that matchup in the wrong way. And when we talked about it last week, where I board out the entire combo and try to just turn into a mid range deck, and maybe there's just too many people still trying to combo them out in that matchup against a fistful of Tormund scripts.
Yeah, but for a reminder for people listening, it's Esper Reanimate or Esper Goros, I guess, went 48% overall, 51% against Titan specifically, but yeah, pretty poorly against Affinity, pretty poorly against Eldrazi Tron. So not what you want to see when it's the deck you're considering, but
Yeah.
you talk about that Affinity matchup, you change that 34% into like 50 or slightly above 50, and then all of a sudden you have probably a decent win rate against the field. You're
Right.
ahead or even against all the the six top decks or something. So that's still kind of nice. Um, what do we have next? Esper Gorios. We had one affinity player, Andrew de Beauvois. Sounds kind of French or Canadian, who made top eight, and his list was pretty stock. The four rebukes, two weapons. It might be exactly Shuhei's list. I forget, but he was still on the two weapons manufacturing. Pretty sure I ranted about that card last week. That card I've yet to see it do anything. Maybe I should go back and see if any of Andrew's matches, if it was good for him. I see some list was one. I don't mind the first one. I feel like it might be good, but yeah, the rest, four rebukes, the four sinks. That was like the fiery eyelets. That were like some of the big changes we saw in these PT lists. That kind of innovation. Um, and
Yeah, the way to get some more lands into the deck without risking flood too much.
yeah, and you were talking about Ashok. He decided to go with two Ashok Dream Renders in his sideboard on top of the two Blood Moons. So he was ready for the Titan matchup, which is not an easy matchup for Affinity, right?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty tough matchup for Affinity in general, especially if they're playing Force of Vigor.
Yeah, like game one's
Kind of
really
some
bad,
splash shade
right?
from the mirror.
Well, pretty bad anyways. The four rebukes help a bit, but sometimes free mana they can just pay for it.
Yeah, and you have Crypt as well, so if they have like a escape shift reliant hand, you might be able to get them, but honestly, it's pretty difficult to find a spot for that a lot of the time as well. I did watch one match Andrew played on camera where he used manufacturing to power out a Kappa and then later lethal his opponent. Whether or not that actually won him the game, I'm uncertain of. I was thinking of you when I was watching that,
That sounds like it
as to
probably
whether or not you
did,
would
the
count
way
it.
you describe it.
Yeah, I mean he played it on turn two, like cast an E and a bobble or something, and then played a turn three Kappa, and it was kind of nice. And Yeah, maybe that's the fabled victory game for weapons manufacturing you were looking for.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds good on paper in theory. I mean, when you look at the card, what it does for you, I just somehow in practice, I've never seen it do anything, but maybe it's just the bad vibes. Yeah, Affinity had not a decent showing, right? We 53%. That's like a little bit better than decent for a deck that probably still had a target on its back. But once again, there's
Yeah,
that
target on
like
its back and sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say there's that kind of odd win rate against Esper Gore specifically. We said 34% from the Gore side, which is 66% from the Affinity side. And if you flip that number to 50-50, it was one of the most played matchups that all of a sudden maybe Affinity doesn't look so appealing anymore.
Right, exactly, yeah. And another hesitant thing about it is the fact that it's behind against Amulet, which is, kind of increasing in popularity week to week.
Yeah.
And from the looks of it, the onus is kind of on the Amulet side to respect the matchup because like the Affinity deck already has or is already playing all the tools to win. Like they already have a bunch of Blood Moons and stuff. They've had that the whole time, so it doesn't feel like they can really do much more to make it better.
Yeah. Next deck I want to talk about is Nine Slaves Finisher. Valerie Jade was in the feature match a decent bit, and I think maybe we saw her lose her winning in against one of the Prowess players, or maybe that was not the very last round, but yeah, came in ninth. Uh, Terminus, four Brain Surge in that list. She took the classic shell of kind of the Orange Chance build. It was four Orange Chance, the one main deck Scepter, Narset Days on Doing. She trimmed some of the Planeswalkers. She was only playing free Narset, free to Fairy. Um, as I say, she trimmed Planeswalkers, but she added a Jace that's usually not in the deck, as well as Teferi Hero of Dominaria. So she trimmed some other stuff, and she played four Terminus, four Brain Surge. Um, Came in nice. A great job to her, qualified for the PT. I saw that list. I felt like I had to try it on stream today, so I did. Um, Terminus was kind of atrocious for me. I was like super skeptical because I've played Brain Surge Terminus, not super recently, but let's say in the past year. And I I played Jeskai Blink 3 times in my first league, so I guess people saw the deck do well, and maybe people testing for their RC, makes sense. But that matchup was really tough, and yeah, pretty much every time I do Terminus, I just wish it was a verdict or literally any. I was joking at some point if my Terminus was a random blue-white card that sees plays in Modern, anything really, it would be better than Terminus for me.
A
So
no more lies to keep everything together.
yeah, like literally any blue or white reasonable cards would have probably been better than the West, faithful mending, like literally anything people play. Anyways, gave the deck a try. I think my first league I went 3-2. I went 1-2 against Jeskai Blank, 2-5 in games. Just kind of tough matchup. You're not super good against Flage. They get a few counters after sideboard, which makes the locks less reliable. They play a bit at instant speed. They have their own Teferis. Uh, so that was tough. I think I beat Storm, which is not a buy, but not that far off a buy when you have Forum's chance in the main deck. Plus, her list was pretty helpful. She had the True Rest in Peace in the sideboard, an extra High Noon, Force of Negation. So that felt pretty good. And then I beat something else. It was actually cool. She was in my chat for a bit, and she said she just kind of played that deck for fun. Her plan A was Belcher, but given how poorly Belcher has been doing recently, she decided to audible, and she's kind of a self-proclaimed boomer. She plays a lot of blue-white control. She said she even tried my dress down laves that I played a while ago. For dress down to rest in peace, but she decided to go with the Orim's Chance build, and for people who are very observant, you can see she has a Windswept Heath in her list. That's just as literally strictly worse Aaron Mesa because it can't get Thundering Falls. And she just said she didn't own an Aaron Mesa. That's how I don't want to say how little she cared about the tournament, but how nonchalant she was about it, I guess. That who doesn't bother to like surely you can find someone who can lend you an Aaron Mesa, right? Like I feel like it's something you never see anymore at that level.
Yeah, I don't even think it's that expensive. So it's yeah, it's really funny to see that. Yeah, like you said, she's so nonchalant about it and ended up doing so well, anyways.
Yeah. So yeah, I was kind of liking the deck though. I wanted to give it a, I didn't give Orim's Chant a fair shot before the PT, which potentially cost our team. Um, and I haven't played it a ton since. So yeah, I figured that was a good time to do so. I made a bunch of changes. I um I decided to cut the Terminus and I added a few verdicts, couple verdicts. No wrap disguise. I decided to not do wrap disguise without tune. I decided to keep the Chant scepter. I added a dress down. I switched from 4 brain surge to 2 consults to start charts, 1 brain surge. So I went a little lower on card advantage. I moved a dress down to the main, a rest in peace to the main. I swapped a spell snare for a scolding because of all these Jeskai Blink decks. Spell snare only hits Philia. Spell snare doesn't hit much more. It hits Philia and Solitude, but in the few games I played in the first league, Solitude was actually a really relevant card, and I felt like just hitting a little something extra would be. Oh, it hits Ragman to that for Ragman, so that's another big deal. I'm just pretty big spell snare hater, pretty big fan of Stern Scolding in general. So that swap made sense. She said maybe Force of Negation should be in the main. That sounded good to me, so I did that. And I kept Jace and Teferi. And especially 5 mana Teferi has been really strong for me. I was really impressed by Monumental Henge too. The land. It found me an Auto War in a game that was pretty cool. I was looking for like artifacts and planeswalkers. Forgot, legendary lands, see any legend, so that was a nice little interaction. And then I added a Purge and a Besa to my sideboard for energy. I think these are 2 of the best free cards you can sideboard in a matchup, along with Lockdown. So decided to go with Purge and Besa. It won me, actually. I got Predating Energy, and they were both amazing. If you are worried about Boros Energy, I think you can maybe even make room for 2 Purge, 2 Besa, maybe make one of these a Lockdown if you want a little more diversity. And yeah, I also was looking for something against Jeskai Blank that would not be dead in mirrors and whatnot, and I decided to just add a Shark Typhoon, and it was actually great for me. The one game I drew it, I traded it for a Dash Ragavan. Yeah, started a second league with the deck. I think I beat Jeskai Blank. I lost to Jeskai Blank, and then I beat Boros Energy. So 3 really close matches, some tough matchups. I'm not sure this is the deck you want to be playing if you expect a lot of Jeskai Blank, but I assume this is pretty good against Titan. So a little give and take, but I think you can maybe tweak the deck to make it decent against Jeskai Blank. And my plan was to just board out Orim's Chant and Scepter. I'm not sure if that's right. I feel like I heard someone talking about that deck at the PT and saying you basically never board out Orim's Chant. I don't know if you know anything about that.
I would be surprised if you didn't board out some number of them a good amount of the time. I could believe like boarding out the scepter and like only keeping in a couple chants. Even in matchups where it's not fantastic, like you can usually find a spot for it. But yeah, I would be surprised if the rule was to stay at 4 after board against everything.
Yeah, maybe this build's a little different, but I think they were saying it, you gotta play the deck like a combo deck. And Orim's Chant is really powerful with the Fairy Time Raveler. But yeah, I was boarding them out a lot in these matchups specifically. The energy matchups, and I got to a plan where I was pretty happy with my in and out both against energy and Jeskai Blink. Was these extra dress downs. I forget what I cut from her sideboard. I think maybe Wrap the Skies. I moved one of the ribs to the main deck. But yeah, I kind of like the deck. Honestly, if I was going to my RC, I would be testing it pretty seriously. I think the deck can close out the games pretty fast too, and I was impressed by the more expensive planeswalkers. A bit, it reminded me a bit of the matchup of blue white against white black blank when that deck was really popular, and how soft they were to chase the mind sculpture and 5 mana Teferi because they had no haste creatures, they had no removal for it. They were pretty bad at attacking these cards, and especially in game one, the Jeskai Blink deck has no hard counters. They just have consigns. They have maybe bolt or discharge, but they don't have a. They have flinch, but they're not super good at interacting with planeswalkers. You can tap out for them, so that part was kind of nice. And as much as
I mean, even usually when you tap out for them, even if they interact with them, you usually got your value, and in those matchups, that's where those edges can add up, anyways.
yeah, yeah, and I really liked having the rest in peace. I think that even with the locks you have, they're not easy to set up in these matchups, and Flage is just kind of a massive headache always. So
Right.
I think that might be a
One th-
good approach.
One thing I was going to ask you about this deck. So something that I liked about her list that I thought was different was the additional copies of Brain Surge, and I know that's a card that you've liked in the past, but you actually ended up cutting back down on them. But I think that card makes a lot of sense in this deck, just because you have so many moving pieces, so many like A plus B ish cards that you kind of want to get rid of at certain points and have access to later. So I feel like Brain Surge would be great in this deck and with additional copies.
Yeah, well, in her list it was a no-brainer because of Terminus, but I think
Right.
the theory is that you already have a lot of free mana cards. Was the Planeswalkers, and Consult the Star Charts is quote unquote the better card of the two.
Do you find yourself casting Consult for 2 mana a lot, or is that kind of a fail case? I mean, even as a fail case, it's nice to have access to, of course, but like, do you think on like turn 4 you're casting it for 2 mana for a high percentage of the time?
You cast it on turn two a decent bit, and you'll cast it on turn two sometimes. On turn 5 or 6, you'll just need to double spell, or
Right.
you're kind of under the gun against Boros Energy, and you just have 2 mana up, and you need to find an answer for whatever you have. So you cast it for two a decent bit. It's obviously really powerful in the late game. It's just seeing like 10 cards sometimes. Getting to pick two.
Yeah, I guess once you have the fifth land, even casting it for 2 mana, if you're looking for something specific rather than quantity of cards, it's going to do a better job than Brain Surge already, even on turn 5. So
Yeah,
maybe
it's
that's enough
such a
reason.
narrow window where it's worse than Brain Surge, but Brain Surge is pretty consistent. And as you said, there's a lot of like you do have a few like awkward cards, moving pieces, etc., where sometimes cards not doing much for you, and that
It'd be
was
nice to
like
get rid of it. Yeah.
yeah, when I was rebuilding the deck, that was literally my last card. I think was that second Brain Surge. Um, so it is really close. You could maybe cut that Jace. Um, but no, I was kind of impressed, and I didn't even really play. I played a bunch of the tough matchups. I think. Um, so yeah, no. Anyways, just shout out to her for qualifying for the PT, and that's gonna tie in what I want to talk about next. But I also tried to find I went down the list of basically every deck that did well, and I was trying to find the best finishing brew, and unfortunately, I just couldn't find anything. Honestly, the closest I found was James Baggett, who I think went maybe 10-5 or 11-4, and James was playing blue red control, which is kind of the wizard deck. He had 4 Snapcaster, 4 Brazen Bar, 2 Tidebinder, 4 Subtleties for creatures, so no Tameo. And he had no trainer, no Tameo, but 4 Flame of Anor, so kind of a different take. He had 1 Spider Sense in the main deck, so yeah, not a ton of innovation this weekend, I guess. The kind of I mean it's obviously really tough in modern, but I don't know if you saw anything special at all this weekend, either on coverage or anywhere in any
Yeah, I
tournaments.
saw. Yeah, I saw James playing on cam. I think it was James, and I saw him playing on camera, and I was pretty jealous, to be honest. It looked like he was having a good time. Definitely a deck I would enjoy playing. If I thought it was a little bit better than it currently is. In terms of brews, or not necessarily a brew, but kind of like a breakout deck, that impressed me was the Simic Birthing Ritual deck, which is a deck that we've seen in the past, but there was actually 2 players who finished in the top 50, I think.
Yeah,
I
one of
don't remember
them
how
got
many.
featured a couple times, right, towards the end of the
Right,
tournament.
yeah. So Kamari Bulger got 30th, and then Chuck Mitchell got 43rd, both playing Simic Birthing Ritual. I'm not sure if they worked together or not. I think I saw something on Twitter, but they had the same main deck, and I think maybe the same sideboard as well, or like one card off. So quite similar lists. I don't know if there's a consensus stock list. But yeah, I mean, just kind of like a cool different take on birthing ritual. Kind of plays the value game a little bit more than trying to do the whole put a 5 or 6 drop into play thing. You just play your Codals and your Coiling Oracles. Maybe you get an Oculus. That's kind of the flashiest thing you can do. But other than that, you're just kind of building a bigger board, a bigger hand, utilizing these cantrip creatures to cast flares and other counter spells, and just slowly taking over the board. I think it's a cool deck. And it's also a main deck Harbinger deck, which is also relevant in the current metagame. Great against Amulet, obviously the most popular deck, and good against Goryos as well, I think.
Yeah, I can't remember if that deck showed up at all at the PT, but if you play on Magic Online, you're definitely used to running it that once in a while. Pretty obnoxious deck to play against. It can lock you out of the game once they get going with rituals and the calls and the free counter spells. Um, did it see any play at all at the Pro Tour?
Not notably, I don't think. No. Not that I recall. I'm not sure if it did poorly or if it just wasn't there, showing up at all. I know that someone posted stats for this weekend, and obviously the samples were really small, but basically everyone who played it did well. It had quite a good win rate, so maybe something worth considering or worth looking into at
Yeah,
least.
a 65% win rate over 94 matches, crushing across the board except for a 25% win rate against is it Prowess. 8 match sample, so 2-6 against Prowess. Good against the rest, 78% win rate against Amulet Titan and 73% against Goryos.
Right.
Um, I feel like if these numbers were realistic, we'd see that deck more online because it's a deck that's been known for a while. I wonder if it was originally a spike deck or not. I know he loves, the whole like Charles agent shell, but yeah, no, I
Yeah, I
guess
mean, obviously these numbers are inflated, right? Like it's just it did well this weekend, so the numbers are going to be high with the samples that small. And it could just be the case of a couple people doing really well, but I mean, this is a deck that I've played against playing Goros before, and it's felt like an abysmal matchup, to be honest. It's kind of a nightmare. So If it's also good against Amulet, maybe it's a good time for the deck to come out because those are the kind of two of the popular decks. And I can't imagine that it's that bad against the Blink strategies either. Like you just kind of have, if your opponent plays a Ragavan and you have a Coiling Oracle, that's already like kind of an abysmal interaction for the Blink decks. So maybe it has the tools.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I guess if you're looking for something a little different, maybe we'll see more of it online. But yeah, I was playing against Jeskai Blink. I played 8 matches today. And I think 5 of them were against Jeskai Blink. So
Wow.
people doing their homework today after
It's
this
an easy
weekend's
deck to pick
results.
up, right?
It's
Like,
yeah,
and
it's
it's
easy.
kind
It's
of
it's fun too. It looks fun, right?
easy,
Yeah,
fun. It's similar to
Ragavan
what people have already
Blink.
been playing.
Really powerful. It makes sense that it would be good. You're playing arguably the two best things you can do in Modern, Riddler Ephemerate Blink, Sphelia, as well as Flage Arena of Glory. So,
Yeah, I really wonder if we just got too tunnel visioned at the PT for. I mean, with the Phantoms is what I was gonna say because like that was kind of most of our biggest gripes, right? Was trying to make the mana base work for Phantom, um, when it basically can't work. It's just not possible. So I wonder if we were just supposed to, give up the Belcher matchup or try to approach the Belcher matchup in a different way, and then have a better mana base overall, better tools against some of the other decks, and just a better overall deck, perhaps.
yeah. I guess that's a good segue, Blink, talking about White Orchid Phantom into uh, what I played a bit this week. Blue Eyed Blank. Obviously, I provided a guide for my Twitch subs, and a lot of people seem to put it to good use. It seemed to put up good results on Magic Online. Obviously, you can never know without having the full picture. So after being kind of I was pessimistic about the deck going into the PT. I was pessimistic about the future of the deck given the PT meta and our results. And I guess I got a little glimpse or a little hopes up. I had people do well locally using my guide, saying it was kind of helpful and the way I approached the matchups. Um, and I had one of my viewers do well in the RC, Gavin. He went 10-5, so pretty solid. Unfortunately, not good enough to qualify for the PT, but he played a pretty stock list. He made me happy. He played the one main deck, Rest in Peace, I believe. And but overall, a pretty poor showing for Azorius Blank. It had 40. Oh, it says 52% actually Azorius Blank. Okay. I guess okay showing up for the PT then. 49% against Sidon, 71% against Goryos, which is really not like when I was playing against you, I did not feel like that good of a matchup, even though I did beat it at the PT. Um, yeah, these numbers are.
We don't have that main deck pest control. I'm telling
Yeah,
you, it makes
yeah.
all the
That
difference. The one slot,
it,
the
it,
losing is it matchup as well. The affinity matchup. It's just that one pest control is making all the difference.
it really does though. For one of it, it makes so much difference. And yeah, who knows with these matchups? Yeah, I see 27% win rate against the main zoo, which is no, I don't think it can be that bad. But no, I don't know. For some reason, I thought I side do poorly. Did not. Did fine. So um, not bad. I didn't play it a ton this week. I did play a bunch of the banned version. Was Birthing Ritual. I had some solid results. I had like a 4 in a prelim. This is the list I 5 of the league was for people watching on YouTube. It had 2 of each of the prides and guides, a Mistcaller and a Might in the main, Conqueror in the main, Flicker Wisp in the main, 1 Stalker in the main, 1 Elishnar, and 1 Recruiter of the Guard. The others still had Renegade Rally or 2. And I was doing fine until this weekend's challenge. I went 0 free drop, which was all disheartening. And I guess for now, I decided to move on. I can't really say when this deck is better, when this deck is worse. I guess the big thing is you don't have White Orchid Phantom in the main, so you're weaker in especially against Tron. Um, you have Elishnorn in the main, which you can find with Ritual, which has been pretty good for me against Titan. So I'd say maybe overall, not sure which version's better, but yeah, I don't know. I think the deck is fine. It's fun. It's still like pretty bad against blue-white control. I lost to that a bunch. I think that was one of my losses in the challenge. So yeah, honestly, not too sure if it's better than blue-white blink, if it's worth pursuing. But I guess my results have been pretty solid. And then I did a fun little experiment, something I like to do once in a while. I'll like once every year or two, I'll try to build blue-white control on a budget. And I usually, manage to pull off a free two, something like that. I think in the past, I managed to keep it maybe under $20, maybe under $50. This time I was looking around on Goldfish and the budget decks were around $100 for the most part. So I was like, okay, I'll try to do under 100. And I was pretty happy because Narset's really cheap and Days on Doing's really cheap, so I could keep that part. Orim's Chant and Scepter was like borderline, and I didn't really want to play these cards anyway, so I decided to go with Path to Exile. And the big thing was the mana base, so I ended up playing Irrigated Farmlands, the cycling land. I ended up playing 4 Glacial Fortress and some Seachrome Coasts. And I got a I got a 5 in the one league I played, so that was really cool. I did dodge energy, which is all this stuff with blue light control. I did dodge the Tron decks, uh, even though I spent most of my budget for a 4 sideboard consign. I think that alone was like $20 in real life, maybe something like that. It was like a fifth of my budget for 4 sideboard cards. But yeah, no, it was kind of fun, cool to do well. This is the list. People watching on YouTube, I had the 4 Dresdowns main deck that I like so much. I played a split of 2 Verdicts to Wrap the Skies, the one Null Drifter to go with the Dresdowns, one Rest in Peace, one Ultima. And honestly, I didn't miss Solitude that much. Path's really good in Modern, especially when you're playing Field of Ruin. I was playing Free Field of Ruin. The Narset Days on Doing thing is powerful, and it was interesting because I had some of the same findings I did when I played Valerie's list today. That 5 mana Teferi was kind of my MVP in both lists, I felt. Um, it works really well in Dallas with Dresdown, Counterspelling Path. It works really well with Orim's Chance. Both Teferi work well with Orim's Chance. And yeah, I gave it another shot. I think I gave the non-budget version a shot in a prelim the day after. So it's basically more or less the same list. So basically swapping Orim's Chance and Scepters for 4 Path to Exile. Uh, and a bunch of Dresdowns not playing Solitude. And I think I maybe went like 2-2 still, so not the worst. But yeah, the mana base, the painless mana base was kind of nice, honestly. I won at least one game against Blue-Green Ritual on 2 life, and I was cycling the farmlands a decent bit. So I don't know if anyone listening to this podcast, watching, is doesn't play Modern because Modern is too expensive, but yeah, I thought I think it's always fun. It's the deck building, challenge is fun, and maybe one or two person likes get into Modern was for under $100. So I
I
don't
think
know.
it's kind of a cool way to like get more experience with cards that maybe you wouldn't play as in such high quantities or as often, right? I also think it's pretty funny that the way that you built the budget deck is just playing more of the cards that you were trying to play in the regular blue white deck, anyways. That part
Yeah,
is pretty funny. It's just an excuse to play more dress downs and to fairies and stuff like that.
well, I was already playing 4 Dresdowns in some of my previous lists, but I was joking that
Yeah,
it was an excuse to play 4 Path to Exile,
right.
in my blue-eyed control deck, not for sure. Scolding, I
I'm surprised
think.
you didn't you didn't try to like lean in. I mean, given all these cards are in your 75 anyways, I was wondering if you were going to try to lean into the dress down consign null drifter stuff like in heavier quantities. If that would have been a better way play all those cards since you have them anyways.
Yeah, I'm kind of a dress down Null Drifter hater. I like using my dress downs for my opponent's creatures and not having to save them for mine. And I haven't been super impressed by Null Drifter when I play against that card, but yeah, maybe I should have gone a little heavier on that. Maybe having a few consigns main deck would have been nice. You already, it's kind of the same issue that the Chant deck has. It has a lot of free drops with these Narcissus and these Teferis. So you could try it. You could try 4 dress downs for Null Drifter, have some consign main deck. I'm not sure if there's other cards you can abuse with dress down. I was considering Wall of Omens too, but then I would lose Kahira. Null Drifter is randomly an elemental, so it
Oh wow, I
actually,
didn't even think about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it actually doesn't make you lose Kahira. And I played a Boomer Colonnade that's also an elemental.
Valerie
Got
had that as well.
Yeah, I cut it from my updated Blue Eye list when I played. Valerie had the one Colonnade. I think maybe Anchorage, if you absolutely want to play a Blue Eye dual land. I think Anchorage is probably a tiny bit better.
Yeah, it doesn't matter that the colonnade's an elemental, right? For Kahira purposes. I mean, I guess it gets the buff, but
No, yeah,
it,
no.
it wouldn't actually
You're
restrict
allowed
you.
to. No, you're allowed. And then since I felt like I didn't need too many cards in most matchups, I was able to dedicate a bunch of slots to anti-control cards. I had 2 Dovin's Veto in my sideboard. I had 4 Disputes and 2 Dovin's Veto. Besa was a little out of my budget, so I went with 1 Sunset Revelry, which was actually pretty good for me. The 1 or 2 times I drew it, I would still recommend Besa. And then I went with 1 Guy's Blessing because of the Mel matchup. Mel's always pretty present on Magic Online, and Emrakul was like $20 or something.
You couldn't even get a Kozilek in there. Is that one also expensive? I don't
That's
I
a
don't know
good
any
point. I
paper
didn't.
prices.
Oh yeah, I didn't think about looking at the other Eldrazi that have the shuffle clause. That's a good point. But yeah, no, some findings. Path is really good, but I think after playing with Orim's Chant, it is probably the best approach in Modern, and that's not even really counting, all the freebies you get when you get paired against Storm, when you get paired against Neoform. Um, there's these spots, these matchups where Orim's Chant's just kind of awesome. So maybe
Yeah, and
if
that stuff matters a lot too, right? Like especially with a format as wide as Modern is, like you're gonna get some freebies over the course of 15 rounds, and when it doesn't even take that much work, and when it's already part of your main plan, it's kind of just a big deal, I think.
yeah. What about like specifically Titan and Espergarius? Do you think you'd rather play against full Orim's Chance or 4 Path to Exiles?
I would rather play against four path as Goryos. I think.
Oh,
I think.
really?
I think.
Wow.
I think the Orim's Chant Planeswalker stuff is actually a little bit scary for. Well, it's mostly Narset. Narset's really scary for Goryos. And I guess you would have that regardless, but being able to kind of protect it a little bit better, or rather not being able to like have those snowball turns when they play it to Fairy, I think is going to be a lot more difficult to beat.
Yeah, I think
I think
Gorim's
the
was.
lock is also kind of real.
Yeah, it's fair. I guess you don't have a ton of it. You have no answers to Scepter. Like you have Force of Negation in the main, and then I guess people are playing that
Yeah,
one
usually I end up
March.
bringing in some Cassines, I think. It depends on their build. When I played against Chris Pateo at the last PT, I had multiple Consigns in my deck because he was kind of heavy on the Chant stuff, or rather the Scepter stuff, and then also had a bunch of Solitudes and Subtleties. Um, so I thought I was going to be able to make use of them, but it depends on the build.
Yeah, I think Goris was one of the matchups I won in my 5 league, and I was pretty happy with Path, but I guess you are somewhat self to chin. Just being able to Paths like against Riddler Ephemerate, pretty strong. Even early on against Frog, you give the land, but Guru doesn't use it that well. It does get much worse if you can't play Field of Ruin, and I will say the Chanless is
Yeah.
really color intensive. You need double white pretty early for the Orim's Chant sometimes. You need obviously double blue for an Arset and counter spell. And that third color that I couldn't afford to play in the budget list. I still played 2 endings, but that third color was super relevant for me for pending. And another thing I want to say is that I think I said in the past a few times that I think people should have the Shockland as their third color and just maybe have more surveil, more blue-eyed surveil. But after playing a bit today, I felt like I would change my mind as long as you're not playing too many colors. Because basically, I think the first up color one you can afford to get early on. You know, you'll get blue-white on one, and then the second time you fetch for a surveil, you'll get blue-red, or you know, either way, or blue-red on one, and then blue-white on two. I think maybe when it gets tricky, if you're gonna play the fourth one, you should maybe go. One of them should be a surveil, and then one of them should be a shock. But if you're just gonna play one of color source, I think it's actually maybe pretty fine for it to be a Thundering Falls because it's
The
not a
surveil.
very high cost to get it in the early game, and then this way it's kind of out of the way and you don't have to worry about it. So maybe I was wrong about that, even though in
Yeah, it's
theory
tough
it kind
because
of
there's
made sense.
awkwardness. There's awkwardness both directions, right? Like the part that you were saying previously, where you want a pending on 3 man on turn 3, and then you don't always have the luxury to get the surveil land ahead of time. Like that part can be really awkward when you have to do that. But then there's also the awkwardness where it's like sometimes your hand's not perfect and you want to surveil, but if you can't surveil because you need to get your off-color dual land, that's a shock land, then that's also pretty bad, right? So
Yeah, and you have the
um,
same issue as Goryo's, right?
right, exactly,
Or
yeah.
you could go
That
you could go breeding pool, or yours is a little different. We've talked about it before because you have so few lands you actually can't afford to just play an extra Esper surveil land and have the breeding pool.
Right. The decision is whether or not you have that fourth surveil land rather than the specific combination of surveil lands.
Yeah, and you still have all 4, right?
I'm still personally a hedge maze believer. Yeah, the list that top aided was the breeding pool list.
Hmm.
Unsurprisingly though, I didn't really expect. I expected the highest performing mana base from the PT to be the mana base that people would copy, right? So
Yeah.
whether or not that's going to change going forward, or if this becomes the norm, or maybe this is just correct. Yeah, I mean, there was a long rant about it last week, but there's pros and cons in both directions. It's hard to tell.
Yeah. Yeah. As far as the blue white list goes, it also depends, I guess, a little bit whether or not you have double white spells early on. I'm not sure what that would be. Maybe Wrap the Skies, which would make you want to get like 2 blue white surveil lands and then get the blue red one later. But um, yeah. I think we did kind of talked about what we wanted to talk as far as modern goes. I don't know if there's any. If you've played a bit of Gores this week, I know you were busy with the qualifier this weekend on Arena. Um, did you play much at all, or was it mostly like practicing for the qualifier and watching the RC?
Yeah, mostly focused on limited this week, and then just keeping up with the modern trends. I expected a big shift after this weekend, which I think is definitely going to happen. So now I can kind of take that information and figure out what I want to do with it. But yeah, I mean, modern looks like it's changing week to week, right? Maybe it's just very balanced. Maybe the population still needs some more time to figure out what the consensus best strategy is. Maybe that's Amulet, maybe that's Jeskai. I don't know.
Yeah. Do
Um,
you foresee
so
some Titan leagues in your future?
I do foresee some Titan leagues in my future. Yeah, I'm gonna do my due diligence. I'm gonna put the work into the deck. I mean, the numbers are, I don't want to say scary, but this is the type of thing that we've seen in the past, right? Like complicated deck that had a few enthusiastic pilots eventually gets picked up by the masses and then kind of has this period of time where it's not doing it's not showing dominant numbers, but it's still showing very good numbers despite a bunch of new population playing the deck. And I'm kind of speaking generally, but like for example, Breach was a deck where this happened, right? Where it slowly got picked up, and then eventually there was this surge where a lot of people tried it and it still had these good numbers, and then as time passed those numbers just got better and better. So maybe we're going to see something like that again, or maybe it's just going to flop back down once people start respecting the deck again, but we won't know until we put the work in, I think.
Yeah, because there's not even the excuse anymore for, oh, Titan, people didn't have the sideboards ready. I mean, maybe they still didn't. I'm thinking of that Affinity list we saw with 2 Ashocks in the sideboard, but maybe that was the exception more than the rule. Maybe people were
Right.
still thinking, Titan, sure, it did great at the PT, but it's hard to pick up. I shouldn't factor that in that much. And no, it was like 11% of the field. So I guess you'd have to like go through every list and take a look at their builds, their sideboard, see if the hate was there and Titan still won, or if people were still like didn't think it would be that popular because of everything we said about Titan and it's not the easiest deck to pick up, etc., etc.
Right. And that point you made about the Isolus or the Ashioks, right? That could easily just be a survivorship bias, right? Like the guy who played the hate ended up doing well, but like you said, we don't know what the norm was without digging into every list
Yeah,
specifically. So maybe there was still a lot of underprepared lists that none of these decks were preying on.
yeah.
And there is some familiarity to playing against the deck as well that I think is important. Whether or not people listening to this podcast are going to be picking up Amulet, I think it's really important for everyone who really cares about doing well at their next RC or their next local event, to kind of put a little bit of work into understanding how the deck works. Where the mana thresholds are, where the breakpoints are for being able to combo, or establish a deterministic loop. Like knowing these things are really important to build your ability to interrupt it, right? You need to know. Like I've seen a lot of spots where people are playing against Amulet, and the Amulet deck has no way to win on the following turn, but they're keeping up like a counter spell or a removal spell because they're afraid, and that's siphoning percentage points. So, um, definitely work to be put in for all parties when it
kind of
comes to
feel
that.
seen. I feel like I must have done that at some point in past few months. I mean, yeah, there's a little learning curve. I remember the first one for me was like realizing how fast they can kill you with scape shift. That was like kind of the
Hmm.
first. Oh, all they need is like an amulet and 4 lands in play, and they can kill you basically. And then there's
Exactly,
like
yeah. Or two
learn.
amulets, 3 lands is another breakpoint.
Yeah,
You, there's a lot of variables when it comes to those lines, like
yeah.
number of lands in their graveyard, whether or not they have, an extra land drop or not. But yeah, they can kill you out of nowhere from a lot of spots.
Yeah, even consigning the last trigger of the saga was not obvious to me at first, and stuff like that. And then learning that, oh yeah, you can use consign if you have consign a bunch of mana. Maybe you can mess up their escape shift kill just by not letting untap, a couple lands, counter these amulet triggers. So yeah, maybe the more people play inside, and maybe the worse it will get. Um, Yeah, I guess that was that weekend big tournament. That's our week. Unfortunately, the crash course did not pay off for me. I didn't even make it to the qualifier itself. I played like 5 planes. I just barely won a match. I know you didn't make it past day one, right?
Correct. Yeah, I ended up going, I think, 4-3 on day one.
Okay.
Um, might have chucked away a couple matches, but yeah, my deck was okay. Nothing special.
Yeah,
And some of my opponents had some difficult to beat bombs.
yeah. That format was that. Yeah, it was like as I mean, your seal decks are just as good as in the past few formats I've played. Like, I feel like you almost always open something pretty good, and you play against a lot of good decks, and yeah, it can be pretty brutal. And then shout out to CubeCon. I was fortunate to do some coverage. That was fun. Shout out to Rashad for the coverage and the whole team, Brian Cole, everyone who's part of CubeCon. Really cool event um, in Madison every year. It was fun to be a part of that. And yeah, I think we're kind of ready to wrap it up with Life on the Line.
Let's do it. Yeah.
So for those of you who are new, Life on the Line is a theoretical tournament. If you win, you live. If you lose, you die. And we have to bring a deck for the formats we've talked about this week. So this week it's going to be just modern. I'll go first for once because I think I know what I would play right now. I'd just play. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I think I would just play Blue-Eye Chant. I would play something pretty close to what I was playing in that second league um, today, which is the classic Arms Chance build, pretty close to stock. The one chase 1/5 mana to fairy. Um, Slight tweak on some of the spells. My pet cards, Rest in Peace, Dreadsdown, Base Sign, Perch in the sideboard. Maybe keep that Shark Typhoon too. But yeah, Blue-Eyed Chant for me. What about you, Edgar?
Yeah, for me, this is actually one of the harder weeks I think that I can remember for Life on the Line because there's three decks that I like a lot. I obviously like the Goryo's deck. Still kind of my favorite deck, but the Jeskai Blink deck is a deck I played a lot for the PT, and I think it having a good showing makes me want to revisit it. And Amulet is a deck that I like a lot as well right now. So pretty difficult, but if I have to pick one, I think I'm actually maybe surprising to some people. I think I'm going to pick the Jeskai deck this week. I like a lot of the changes that were made. I think that the list looks clean. I think not having to respect Belkur as much kind of fixes a lot of the problems I have with the deck. And I think that you can kind of just tune the slots to be what you want to be week to week. So I think I'm going to go with the Jeskai deck, but I'm going to keep working on the other two.
Cool. Well, there you have it. As always, if you made it this far, thank you so much for listening/watching. Edgar, where can we find you online?
You can find me and my little ramblings on Twitter still or X at EdgarMTG, and yeah, that's about it. And on Blue Sky as well.
Yeah, you can find me on Blue Sky. You can find me on Twitch, streaming most days, twitch.tv/yellowhat. If you have any questions, that's like a great way to reach out, come and interact during the stream. Um, I do have a Discord too, but it's more fun if I answer questions on stream. Um, and we will have more RCs to talk about next week, maybe. I'm not sure. And then we have the standard bands coming soon. We're going to be uh, starting our standard testing maybe before, maybe as soon as that happens. When are the standard bands? Like November 10? Does that sound right?
That sounds late to me.
Oh.
No, actually, no. Maybe that's right because Worlds isn't for a month after that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe beginning of November.
And then I think it's tomorrow, Tuesday. I think Huey's making an announcement about organized play, something near and dear to his heart. So a lot of people, myself included, have speculating that's maybe the Hall of Fame coming back. So
That's the thing that makes the most sense to me. I can't really I don't really have any other ideas of what it could be to be
yeah.
honest. So I'm gonna be surprised if it's not that. But that's gonna be a cool change, I think.
So yeah, if that's what it is. But yeah, we'll be back next week. Keep updating you on modern. I'm probably still gonna be playing a decent bit of modern for now. You're gonna be testing for your RC. So hopefully we can keep helping people out. People that still have upcoming RCs, whether it's the one in Vegas, the one in Europe, Canada, other parts of the world, and yeah. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you all have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.
See you next week. Bye.